And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Alla sua salvatrice potestà, aprite i confini degli stati, i sistemi economici come quelli politici, i vasti campi di cultura, di civiltà, di sviluppo. Non abbiate paura.
Good morning. Welcome to Mediocre Guys, just talking about the world and talking about our faith and talking about politics and culture and all that sort of stuff. Welcome, Marsh. How are you?
Excuse me, I'm just drinking a little bit of lemonade.
Good. That makes great TV.
Well, hey, it's two guys drinking a big cup.
Mm-hmm. How are you?
Not too bad. How about yourself? It rained today. It was a downpour. I was at the supermarket and I was like, what is that noise? And it was just a deluge.
Okay. I'll start off by reading an article. It's a bit long, but I think it's a good seed for our conversation. Under the headline, "A Catholic MP's vote for abortion up to birth reveals a rot in UK governance and religious formation." There are certain occasions in history which define themselves as before and after moments. The Kennedy assassination was one, the terrorist attack of 9/11 was another. Arguably, the week in which Parliament voted to decriminalise abortion until birth on day one and legitimise assisted suicide on another was also one of those occasions which will remain as a searing of the communal memory, for Catholics at least. To be historically aware, one of the ways in which Christianity most clearly defines itself, and being different from both pagan and atheist alternatives, is the passionate and profound belief in the sanctity of life. We might go further and say that this belief and practice is one of the main distinguishing features that allows us a call to Christian culture. If a culture and civilization is not Christian, the alternatives are it is either pagan or secular. Increasingly, it seems that there is an overlap between secular and pagan. Tom Holland uses a pity and protection of babies as the litmus test of Christian culture. In an interview, he explained, quote, "Archaeologists can generally tell the pre- and post-Christian society is in the drainage system because pre-Christian sewers are littered with little baby bones." In his book Dominion, he reminds us of the impact Christianity, as he looked out through the eyes of the Cappadocian Fathers, St. Basil the Great and Gregory Nazianzus. While Gregory noted his friend Basil as his teacher, in his insistence on equal worth of humans, he was more influenced by his older sister, Macrina. He wrote, "The eldest child in the family, it was Macrina, who had convinced Gregory to abandon an aristocratic civil career and take up an ecclesiastical post. She was also well educated and highly intelligent, but she took on an ascetic life and devoted herself to caring for the sick and the poor with a passionate intensity that marked all of the family's endeavours. In a world where infanticide was widely practiced, with infant girls being the most commonly abandoned to death, Macrina searched garbage dumps for babies left to die and brought them home to raise. When she died," Holland notes, quote, "it was not his brother, the celebrated bishop, whom Gregory thought to compare to Christ, but his sister. In Holland's view, the actions of St. Macrina symbolically marked a moment when the ancient world moved from its pagan past into a Christian future. Okay, there's still half an article left, but I won't read the rest. But I think it's interesting. I've read, I've got a book here, which is on the Cappadocian Fathers, Three Wise Men from the East, and it's written by Patrick Whitworth with a foreword by Rowan Williams, who is the Anglican, well, was the Anglican Archbishop of where?
Canterbury.
Canterbury, thank you. Canterbury Cathedral. But apparently he did his studies in Christology, because the foreword in this is, it's quite orthodox and you know, looks to the early councils, and he's quite perspicacious in as much as he understands the early councils at least, and is solicitous to them. Anyway, enough about Rowan Williams. So it's his sister who was the better Christian, according to Gregory.
She a nun?
I don't know if she was actually a nun. She was an ascetic, which is probably a precursor to nuns. I'm not sure if she lived in community or by herself. But
She might have been what's called an anchoritis.
Yeah, she might have been an anchorite. But I don't know a lot about her. I mean, like I said in this book, which I can't help flogging because it's a very good book actually. It mentions her en passant, but it doesn't go deeply into her life. But they credit her with being a serious theologian in her own right. But like so many good women,
I can hold on. I don't mean to interrupt you. I can hear you, but you're buffering.
But I'm popping.
There, it's better now. Yeah, popping in and out with the camera, but you're better now. Okay. It was just a momentary buffering.
Okay. So where are we? The truth of today is that there are more abortions now than there ever have been, and I don't want to go into the stale argument of just pointing at women and saying, women, you're bad, don't have abortions. That seems too easy and lets men off scot-free. But I kind of feel like we need to build a society from ground up that is based on a positive life affirming message. Like I said last week, both euthanasia and abortion were topics of the UK Parliament, and we lost both arguments basically, and a lot of Catholics voted in favour of both, and that's a deep shame. So anyway, what are your thoughts?
Well, obviously, I haven't read those theologians, but it's troubling. It's troubling that our culture does not seemingly value the sanctity of life, and I think, you know, there are all sorts of arguments for sanctity of life, and maybe we don't. That's not the discussion here. But you know, there's a sort of it's bred over into our politics, into our identity kind of tribalism, where our ideological opponents are not humans anymore. They are simply faceless, nameless identities worthy of scorn and every name in the book and violence and everything else. And I think that stems from this idea that's at the core, this nihilism that says human life has no meaning.
Yeah,
beyond its utility.
That's what I was going to touch on. I think it's utilitarian, isn't it? It's because this pregnancy interrupts my life and it labors me with responsibilities and all that jazz. And so, how do you make it easier for a woman in a crisis pregnancy to deal with that pressure? That life is going to change now that you've fallen pregnant. Life as you knew it is to be put away, and life that's coming is the next step.
I think we've moved. Sorry, go ahead.
I think that's a big responsibility for women, and it's not an easy nut to crack.
But I think we're moving beyond that. I don't think that's the conversation anymore. The conversation isn't, it's sort of a tragedy. It's sort of celebrated now in society where you have things like shelter abortions. Women are wearing shirts that say, I've had 21 abortions. It's seen as an empowering thing. Bodily autonomy arguments. It's no longer sort of as when I was growing up, and probably when you were growing up and previously, it's like, well, it's a tragedy. It's unfortunate, but we still need to, make sure it's safe. They would always say safe, legal, and rare. In fact, Hillary Clinton used to say that in the rare part, and they would say the liberals and the Democrats and that used to be some, we disagreed with them, but we could find common ground in the sense that no one likes this. No one thinks that it's a tragedy. These women are victims. They're hard up. They don't know what to do. But I think we're moved beyond that discussion in our society too. A woman should have the right to an abortion for any reason, up to on demand for any reason up to the moment of birth, as the UK did. It's not saying we're protecting. They're not saying we're protecting the health and life of the mother. That used to be, I think that's a specious argument because it's such a slippery slope of what health and life of the mother means. That's open to interpretation by the doctor. It's too wishy-washy. We're beyond that argument. We are now into the greatest, what Margaret Sanger said, which is the greatest thing that a family can do to its members is kill it. And I'll get the quote, and I'll find the quote for you later. But essentially, we're in a situation where there's no more shame around it. The taboo is going away. And it's like they've deadened their consciences so much that it now becomes, this is wonderful. This is a celebration of me coming out and being autonomous and free. And this is, they call it reproductive freedom, and they couch it in all these euphemistic terms, sanitized language. Even the term pro-choice is sanitized language. Pro-choice to do that. But it doesn't seem to bother their consciences anymore because, like I said, I don't want to repeat myself, but it seems to be, hey, rah, 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 in the streets, rah, 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 in Congress, the more abortions, the better. And that seems to be, in the media, everybody is like, well, no one's saying that, but yeah, they are. What do you think about that, moving beyond this is a tragedy, what do we do for the woman, to the woman is making an informed, in her view, an informed, free, rational choice for whatever reason, not just because she's in a bad situation. Go.
Yeah, think that there's a lot of utilitarianism going on. I think people see babies as useless. If anything, they're a burden on your wallet, on your time, on your career, on your sleep. I think in so many ways, a child is a burden. And I think the same is true of the old. And we're not exactly going along and bumping off Granny, but we're offering Granny the choice. Granny, you're old, you're a bit useless. Why don't you just pop this pill and it'll all be over? And it's quite shocking in its simplicity. But I think at both ends of life, the womb and the tomb, we're dealing with a lack of utility in the subject. So the individual who we target for death, whether it be the unborn baby or whether it be Granny, we're really bumping them off because they're quite useless to society.
They're inconvenient to us.
Yeah, and that's an interesting counterattack from utilitarianism.
Well, in terms of the abortion argument, the reason I see this paradigm shift from what you're talking about into this new radical idea is like they're countering the argument of, well, wait a minute, it is an extreme position to suggest up until the moment of birth. Because it used to be, even the majority of people who, or a lot of people that were making the pro-choice argument, could still kind of say, well, once the fetal heartbeat starts, once they're suffering, the capability for the baby to suffer, they would have a definite kind of cutoff period where they would say, okay, it's not so much bodily autonomy anymore. It's now the child gets some rights, like basically when it has the ability to suffer.
Okay,
I think that's
talk slowly and clearly so we don't pop your mic.
Okay.
So yeah, I think utility is one of the critical factors that we've got to deal with it again, and I mentioned it to someone else I was talking about. It's the ancient enemy of the church to say that that a person is an asset only gives them currency for a certain period of their life, between the ages of 16 and 60, when they can do something for society. Then that's the period in which we celebrate them, and you're doing great, your career's going great, and you're doing, you're an inventor, or you're Elon Musk, or you're someone else. But outside of that, then utility comes down with its deadly precision and says, well, you're no longer useful, or you've never been useful. You may one day be useful, but you're certainly not useful at the moment. And so I don't blame women for that. I think men are as to blame for allowing utilitarianism to kind of reign.
Well, it's a social Darwinist kind of eugenics argument that only the fittest survive, in the sense, well, that doesn't need any explanation. Getting back to the abortion argument, that they've moved beyond the safely going word to up to the moment of birth. Now, they don't come out and admit that because they know it doesn't sell on Main Street. But when they do admit it, the argument then becomes, well, it's the utilitarian argument. Excuse me. They'll say, it doesn't matter when life begins. It doesn't matter any of that. The fact is, the fetus is a foreign invader. Essentially, the parasite argument, which doesn't work. But they'll literally say word for word, no one gets to use your body or my body without my consent any more than, and so their argument would be, if I'm in a coma, ironically, you can't chop off my arm to save you. I have bodily integrity, which is true. You do have bodily integrity, but it's this idea that the fetus is a foreign invader. I did not consent to, have the fetus in my body. Therefore, I have the right to expel a foreign invader. So it's like basically the human being is a virus. That's what they would argue. That's what they're saying.
Pirate. Hi, avast me, Yetis. I'm coming aboard, Captain. And it's like, oh, let's get the pirates out. So.
But it's a dehumanizing language, and it's a sanitizing of the language. Godwin's law says any time or longer an online discussion goes, the more likely somebody will invoke Adolf Hitler. But action T4 was, we're doing these people a favor. We're doing good. And the argument that I hear now is a utility argument. As you said, it's, oh no, are you going to adopt the babies? They might end up in foster care. They might be poor.
I've seen posters of the Action T4. Action T4 was kind of semi-secret, and then it burst into the press. And then first among them were Catholic bishops to complain about it. And they led the sort of, this is appalling. Now, it didn't stop. They just secreted it again and then continued the process of Action T4. And for those in the audience who don't know what Action T4 was, it was a widespread euthanasia program in the early Nazi reign and leading up to the Second World War. And then it says, well, it costs $60,000. There's a picture of a man with, I guess, epilepsy or something in a wheelchair. And it says, well, it's sad, but it costs $60,000 to take care of this guy for life. So that was the justification. So instantly it's about money, it's about resources, and it's about all the things that utilitarians love to talk about. It's just common sense. If we bump off, cousin Jeffrey, then life will be easier.
The economy, because for the economy.
Yeah, he's a nuisance, really. I mean, he's a pest because he doesn't produce.
Well, it's the same thing with the argument of, well, if we deport illegals, who's going to pick our crops?
Anyway, yeah.
And in who's going to do? They're going to do they're going to do jobs American doesn't. And do you want to pay $8 for eggs? Because so it's like, wait a minute, you guys used to be the people that defended a living wage, and now you're saying that it's going to be too much of an economic burden, so we're going to exploit these people, who have no choice. It's like, well, they're willing to work for us. No, they have no choice. I never took a job where I, quote, wanted to work for less. I had no choice but to work for less. It was either that or don't have a job. So the thing is that it's kind of coming full circle, and it's like, without slaves, who's going to pick our cotton? And it's like it doesn't register the leap there, the fact that one follows from the other. And it's like, well, the immigrants are, here for us to pick our crops. And that's all they can do. They're here to serve us. We are their masters, right? They're here to
it's almost
ensure
it's almost a subclass,
a head of lettuce,
isn't it? It's like a class. It's like a like a serf class that have invaded into the countries. But if you listen to one side of politics, well, they're illegal, but let's not worry about that too much because they're picking the cotton and they're picking the fruit and veg, and we can't do it any other way. And it just makes sense on my spreadsheet. And it's like, well, hang on. You're condemning to these people to live in the shadows of your society all the time. Set aside that they entered illegally, but just the lot they pick up in life as an illegal is like a subclass. Anyway, so we have a story on the Catholic Herald about Lily Allen. Now, you probably don't know who Lily Allen is, but Lily Allen is a pop star, I guess, and she's an uber liberal. And there's an article there which I don't want to go into it too much because I think if you want a good read, it's under the title "Groomed by the West: Lily Allen and the Culture That Failed Her" by Catherine Bennett, and it's on the cover of the Catholic Herald for all those who want to track it down. And I won't go into it too much, but it's an interesting read about why Lily Allen is saying I had an abortion and it was good, and and her fabulous career, and how she was used by society, by the music industry, by her family, and she was really, although she sounds like an enemy, she's as much as a victim of liberalism as anything else. And her liberalism, or the culture's liberalism, has become like a prison for her, and she's done all the orthodox liberal things, and except be happy, be truly happy. Anyway, that's on the Catholic Herald.
That brings up another topic of sort of third wave feminism, which says that the only way a woman can be happy is if she chases mindless careerism. Blurring. Well, that's the whole thing about the gender confusion and everything. Essentially, look, men and women, the lie is men and women are interchangeable. Take a man out, put a woman there, put a woman out, put a man there. So it's like men are women, women are men, but it's you're not going to be fulfilled. Society's telling these women you're not going to be fulfilled as a mother, as a wife. Balancing career, absolutely. I mean, she shouldn't have to be barefoot and pregnant. That's not what I'm saying. But I've read and heard interviews with women that said they were lied to because you're 65, you made a gajillion dollars, or you argued so many cases in the court, and you come home to your empty house with whining cats. And it's like, are you happy? It's like and I'm not saying it's even good for men to be workaholics and to kind of just neglect their family and other things that are important. We are one of the ways that the government measures poverty is something called the Gini coefficient. I don't know if you're familiar with the Gini coefficient is. It's essentially there's a matrix of determining what it means to be poor. And a large part of that is this thing called the Gini coefficient, which means the direct either debit or credit of a person's bank account. And they also use this to measure happiness. And so it's like I said with the earlier touched on the lie of the abortion argument of, well, it's a utility argument. It's like the Action T4 argument. It's like, well, are you going to adopt these kids? They might end up poor. They may end up in the inner city. They may end up in, as if suffering and poverty is like the worst thing that can happen to you. Better dead than 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 being foster care, or better dead than grow up without Nikes, a new pair of Nikes every month. And that's your measure of happiness. Look, the majority of the world probably lives on less than $5 a day. The vast majority of the world, in Asia and Africa, etc. And my aunt and uncle were missionaries to Belize, a country in Central America. And they said they would come into this village, and there were children playing, and there was raw sewage, and obviously we want to come in and bring development and civilization and clean drinking water and everything. But I'm not talking about that. They sat in a family's home with a dirt floor and a tin roof, but the mother swept up the dirt floor, and what little food she had, she shared with them, and they really connected on a human level. And obviously, we don't know because we can't see inside their hearts. But my aunt and uncle um, relate that they seemed happy because families were intact. They had a strong faith. They had a strong sense of unity. We're all the village. We're all in this together. I need, I had a corn harvest. Here, have some corn. And that's the unfortunate part of utility argument, is radical individualism. And Pope Pius X in the Syllabus of Errors condemned radical individualism and radical what's called Americanism, which says in freedom and individuality and all that is important, but it can be taken to its extreme, which says I'm an island unto myself, and I am the master of my own destiny. Yep. And I don't need anybody else. Just like the argument, I don't need no man, or to be happy or whatever. I don't need, it's this idea that I'm only free when I cast off this idea that I'm part of something, or I'm part of a whole. I'm not just an individual.
Do you remember?
Like a Gestalt thing or something. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you remember about 12 months ago, there was this question posed on the internet: would you rather be in the wild with a bear or with a man? And, all these, well, the usual suspects turned around and said, oh, the bear, obviously, because a man's horrible. And it's so stupid because actually, even if you can't defend yourself against the bear, then the company of a good man will give you a lot better odds at surviving a bear attack if you've got the man there, and let's say he's armed, and so on and so forth. So I know it was just a stupid reaction to it, and there was so many women who jumped up and down and said, "Oh yeah, the bear," because they're stupid. But there's actually something in the idea that the best protection against a bad man is a good man. If you're a female, if you're a female and you've got to walk home from a party, then I'd invite you to ask one of the guys at the party to say, look, can you walk me across the park? I live the other side of the park. Can you walk me across there? Because it's 2 a.m. and I want to go home, but I don't want to walk alone. And, if you're at a party, get someone someone who is known to everyone at the party, and just say, look, do you mind? I'm not coming on to you. I don't want anything. I've got a boyfriend, in fact, or whatever. But can you walk me through the park because I'd be afraid to go alone. Now, that takes a bit of humility, but only a bit of humility. And if it saves your life, then, don't be stupid. Don't live your life in a feminist fantasy that a man needs a woman. A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. That's the stupidest comment you could ever make, because the defense against bad men is a good man.
Mazie Hirano's like, there's a competition for the dumbest person in Congress, and she might be up. She's definitely in the top 10. And she said during the Brett Kavanaugh thing, which is a whole nother discussion, men need to sit down and shut up and do the right thing for once. Well, the world gets really scary really fast when the men sit down and shut up. Not only men, but they're telling us straight white Christian men to sit down and shut up. Or this idea of, well, if women ran the world, there'd be no wars, everything would just be gumdrops and rainbows.
Yeah.
But I live in Minnesota, and in the wintertime, the power and the heat's got to stay on. You're buffering again. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, maybe it'll clear itself up. A lot of these things clear itself up in a minute. But anyway, good luck with climbing a line and restoring power. Good luck keeping the heat on. Good luck running the coal plant. Good luck, they're not going to do it. They want us men there when they want us, but they want us to go away and basically fuck off and die, excuse my language, when they don't want us. But
yeah,
we fight the wars, and
I don't doubt that there are women out there who have had bad experiences with men, and that sort of gives them a jaundiced outlook. I don't doubt that, but this ideology of feminism has really marked men as the enemy, if not sort of just someone we've got to share the world with, but compete against with resources and things like that. And it's so, I don't know, it's so Marxist to kind of fight against men and women having to fight each other for dignity or something. And there's a much better way, and that's Christianity.
That's the we defeated overt communism at the end of the Cold War with the fall of the Soviet Union, but these ideas are pervasive. And it always seems like it's a dichotomy of oppressor and oppressed.
Yeah,
and
I don't think you defeated communism with the fall of the Iron Curtain, because they went over to the Frankfurt School, and then the Frankfurt School festered a whole different sort of number of paradigms about the oppressor and the oppressed, and that filtered out into Western society.
Critical theory, and but I hear what you're saying, but my overarching point is it's either fomenting the class warfare wherever that it isn't just economic. It's like whether it's race hatred or gender hatred, in the sense that we're at war with one another. Whether it's the poor versus the rich, the blacks versus the white, men's versus women, gays versus straight. It's always this dichotomy that they're trying to keep us fighting there. And, it's sort of the Catholic, the Catholic answer and alternative to that is class cooperation. We're in this together. We might have some competing values in goods, but let's find common ground so everybody gets what they need and what they want. And so, for instance, management provides a safe environment, a living wage, a safe working environment, and those that are producing the goods, are loyal and they work hard and they show up and they're loyal to the company. You see, so it doesn't have to be men versus women, gay versus straight, rich versus poor. It can be a cooperation, but that's not Satan's greatest lie, and is to go to war against the family, because the organic family, the natural family, the nuclear family is the building block of civilization. The organic outpouring of that starts in the family, but neighborhood, community, and Satan hates the family because obviously the Holy Trinity is a family, mirrors in the Holy Trinity, and then the Holy Family of Nazareth. But anyway,
yeah, I think the modern Marxist would want to disassemble the nuclear family because it's seen as oppressive. Now, what their idea is,
they want to replace it with state worship.
Yeah,
the state becomes your family.
It's a bit weird to me what they want to replace it with. I mean, I'm presuming that they whisk away your baby at a young age as soon as it stops breastfeeding, and then put it in a sort of camp or something like that with 100 other children, and then there's a nanny or something like that. I mean, it's all very bizarre, and it all makes human beings the property of the state, not the state being the property of human persons. But it's all
right. A good example of that is something I wanted to hit on is in the '60s with the Great New Society by Lyndon Johnson, by the way, which had some wonderful things about it. The Civil Rights Movement, the Voting Rights Act, really started to, I don't like the term war on poverty because it's like, I don't like these wars on things. It's like, what's the exit strategy? Just throw endless money.
Because how's that war on drugs turning out for you?
War on poverty, it's like, oh my God, it's so spare no expense, bear any burden. But one of the things that happened, and by the way, the Civil Rights Movement was wonderful. It was needed. Obviously there was oppression, but sort of the backlash to that went too far in the other direction. Like, okay, well, we'll move minorities into the inner city, and we'll build them public housing. These high-rise. I'll give Chicago as an example. Cabrini Green, Robert Taylor Holmes, you might have heard of this, featured in the horror film Candyman and other places. And they were virtual war zones. They were high-rises, the worst of the worst of public housing, drugs, gangs, hell on earth. Garbage piled up in the garbage chute to the 15th floor, roaches and rats, in a veritable demilitarized zone. Just children getting caught in crossfire, abductions, murders, rapes. My point is that the thinking was initially, well, we'll take care of you, women, and your children. We'll give you public housing, we'll give you welfare, we'll give you these benefits. However, but to qualify for that, means that the father can't be in the home, right? Because if he's in the home, then he's working and he doesn't need benefits. But it's institutionalizing poverty because it says it removes the father from the home. Generations of young children being raised by single mothers, drugs, crime, absentee families.
Yeah, I think it was well meaning, but I think it produced, because it produced a perverse incentive system. The incentive was you tell your man to hit the bricks, and then you get pretty good welfare and are taken care of. Now, why it ended up like that, I don't exactly know. But I would just like to point out, I think it was well meaning. Like, when we started off talking about abortion and how do you make life easier for an expectant mother? And, giving her a home and all that sort of stuff may be part of the recipe. But we don't want to set up perverse incentive structures that break up the nuclear family and leave people dependent upon the state.
That's my point. Is the dad leaves, and the mom has got her issues and drugs and all that, and the state knocks on your door and says, "We'll raise your kids." But here's the thing: Uncle Sam isn't present. He's in Washington, so his throwing endless money at the situation doesn't teach, isn't going to teach little Johnny how to read, isn't going to put his backpack on him, isn't going to make a PTA meeting. Your congressman isn't going to show up to cheer on little Sally at soccer practice. Mom and dad do that. So, but it does, it essentially, and we know some people in chat who will, are avowed communists and stuff, and then it's like, well, I'm an atheist. No, you're not. You simply worship the state. And the I always from time to time watch the old, it's a bit dated, but the old Twilight Zone episode about the obsolete man.
Oh, I don't think it's dated as you think. I think it's quite perspicacious. I think it has a beautiful insight into even things that are around today.
But the interesting thing is the revolution ends up eating its own, because just like the utility argument, or just like the, you can make a pro-life argument from a secular perspective. You can say, well, I wouldn't want anybody to come around and enslave me or abort me or exploit me. So why would I do that to anyone else? Why would I deprive of anybody else's right to life? And you can make a completely naturalistic argument and say, and there are wonderful organizations called like secular pro-life, atheists for life, and their argument is they don't make a God argument, and I think they're important to the discussion, because anytime you bring religion into the debate, people will dismiss as, well, I don't believe in your religion, and then it gets bogged down into dogma and all that. But they say, look, this is the one life you get. The universe is cold and indifferent, and it's not cold and indifferent, but billions upon billions of galaxies and stars, and they comment on both the insignificance of human and the profound significance of humans, because they will say, well, if I get to live 90 years and then that's it, then I might as well make the most of my 90 years, because that's it. And so they'll say, like, well, if we go around aborting people, that we're robbing them of their one chance at life, at consciousness. and because death is it, the finality. We're bouncing around from argument to argument. I understand that, but um, but the point is that with the utility, getting back to the utility argument, the just like in the obsolete man, the chancellor became useless,
Yes.
right? And that's what I meant by the revolution needs its own. What happens when you become infirm? What happens when you become dependent on a machine or others?
Well, what does
Ooh,
that say for Medicare and Medicaid and the current argument in Washington that, you know, maybe there's too many, I don't know, slugger beds or whatever we're going to say, or, you know, I don't, this is why I'm a conservative, but I'm not a Republican, because some of the people on the Republican side are complete loonies. You know, they're sort of, they think we should worship the economy, which is another way of worshipping the state.
and it's funny. I agree with you, and it's funny. It's not funny, haha. It's funny, ironic because and they tend to be more on the Protestant work ethic, kind of like, well, if a man doesn't work, a man shouldn't eat, and sort of, and every time you sort of try to make the argument, well, you should throw the poor a couple of nickels once in a while. Oh, well, the poor you will have with you always, and that's just a cop out to not have to do a damn thing and lift your finger. But they're they have ideas that are contrary to their own interests. Because look, you're right. I'm a conservative, not a Republican. I'm not a capitalist, right? I don't have any capital. I'm not a magnate. I'm not a robber from the 17th century. I'm not a Cornelius Vanderbilt or Henry Ford or so. It does need a balance, doesn't it? So I don't really like the left right paradigm. That's kind of
I think it's old hat.
enlightenment.
I think it's something that grew up in the French Revolution, um, and we still use the terminology of left right. But I think it's lazy, and I think if we thought deeply about it, then we would see the differences between us, um, maybe differently, and maybe expose the differences in a way that we haven't thought of, which might produce solutions.
The left right political definitions and paradigm does not. It's almost it's clashing with a Christian politic. It is, and that's what the utility identity argument is. It clashes with that because the Christian ethic is that we are all in this together, and we don't shouldn't matter if you're poor or rich or gay or straight or black or white or male or female. All have dignity. All are worthy of love. All are made in the image and likeness of God, and therefore we should all cooperate for a better, moral, and just world.
Yeah, and having said all that, I don't propose that you ignore utility and just be some sort of dummy who drives the bus off the cliff. Obviously, there are certain things we've got to keep a functioning judiciary, we've got to keep a functioning um, legislature, a functioning executive, a functioning economy, and so on and so forth. So, in my criticisms of utilitarianism, I'm not saying that we should do nothing uh, with utility. I'm just saying it shouldn't be our guiding star. It shouldn't be a matter of a spreadsheet that convinces me upon a certain course of action. It needs a humanistic answer to the very real problems of humanity.
People aren't beings to be counted by actuaries and insurance people.
Agreed. All right. With that,
yep, we're done.
Yeah, we're done.
Okay.
Thank you for we had 2 listeners. We got 1. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be back again. We haven't got a schedule yet. There's a few things we need to put in place, but eventually we'll try and do it on a regular basis. That we live stream for an hour and just talk the sort of talk that we've been talking so far. Okay, thanks for listening, and let's go to the outro.